Howdy, Facebook Live. Sean Yesner here, and I need to record some content for some upcoming podcast episodes. And so I thought I'd do that live and let you watch it. This will also then go up on YouTube when we're done. And the episode that I'm recording now will probably end up going live probably the first week or two of December. I've got all of November set. I've got next week's episode on Thanksgiving already set, and I've got the following week already set as well. So I thought I'd show you sort of a behind the scenes on how I record a Crushing Debt episode. Before I do that, bye for 1 minute. I forgot to get something. Hang on. Sorry, I need a prop for this week's episode. So a prop that you all will see on Facebook Live, but not a prop that we will see on the actual podcast recording itself. Those of you that want to jump in and join live, those of you that are watching live, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them after I'm done recording the episode. I will answer your questions for you. So let me get started. This week's episode is going to be on divorce and property, and it was submitted to me by Jeannie Restrepo, who is over at Become a Better Agent, or BABA. And so she saw that there was a lack of content in the podcast. And so I'm going to record this episode basically for her, but also for all of you. So I love your suggestions. I love your topics. If you have stuff you want me to talk about on the podcast, please let me know. Either shoot me an email or something, and shoot me an email and interact with me on Facebook, whatever. But I'm going to start this week's episode of the podcast, which is going to be divorce and property issues. So on this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, divorce and property issues. So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner with Yesner Law. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by both my law firm and now my new book, Crushing Debt is all. It's available on Amazon. And for those of you watching on Facebook Live, I'm holding up the book so you can see it. For those of you listening to this podcast episode, you'll have to either find the Facebook Live or you'll have to go to Amazon to order the book. But I would really appreciate it if you enjoy the book. Go ahead and leave it a positive review, a positive rating. That way other people will find the book, and it talks about all the different areas that I cover here on the Crushing Debt podcast. So I would really, really appreciate all of your support. But this week's topic comes to us from Jeannie Restrepo with Become a Better Agent. So I want a huge shout out to Jeannie, and a huge shout out to the BABA community for giving me this week's topic. If you have a topic that you want me to talk about on the podcast, please let me know. I'm happy to do so. But Jeannie's thought that there was a lack of content on the podcast regarding divorce and property law. So I thought that's what I'd talk about. Not the divorce side of the property of the law, but the property side of the law. If you're interested in a divorce, if you are going through a divorce, if you need a divorce, I do have some references on my website. Check out one of my past episodes is with some ladies, the Cash Wise ex-wives. You can check out that episode. That's a pretty recent one. That's episode number 140. Shanna and Kayla there with Cash Wise ex-wives. You can look them up if you want issues on divorce. If you're here local in the Tampa Bay area and you have questions about divorce, please contact me. I can connect you with some really great divorce attorneys in the area. But divorce is not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the property law in connection with the divorce. So one thing that I think people don't understand, Florida has a constitution, and I actually am just finished up with the Great American Teach-In, and I was talking to a group of first graders and fourth graders about how government worked and the Constitution and all that stuff. What a lot of people may not realize, I know what I didn't realize until I got a little bit older, high school age, junior high age, whatever, is that not only is there a United States Constitution, but there's also a Florida Constitution. And so the Florida Constitution talks about homestead rights of spouses. And so one of the things to understand is that the homestead rights flow through the spouse. And so what I mean by that is, let's say a husband, and this actually happened to me. So I bought my house when I was single. I then got married. My first house I bought when I was single. I then got married. Well, my wife's homestead rights in the house flow through me. So if my wife had ever executed a quitclaim deed and tried to take herself off of title to that house, or even if we were on title to the house together and we decided to separate and she decided to take her name off title to the house, her homestead rights in that property flow through me. So she can't execute a quitclaim deed and take herself off of title to the house, or eliminate her homestead rights. She can take herself off of title, but she can't eliminate her homestead rights unless or until we were to get divorced. She would still have to sign any deed to that property. She would still have to sign any mortgage to that property. The thing that allows her not to do that would be the divorce itself. So that's number one. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I run into with married people is the note and the mortgage. And so a lot of people will say, well, I'm not on the mortgage. I don't make the mortgage payments. Well, again, from Baba, as my good friend Kevin Overstreet said, nobody makes a mortgage payment. We make note payments. The mortgage is simply the lien that secures the note payment. So we don't make mortgage payments. We don't make mortgage payoffs. We make note payments and we make note payoffs. If we don't pay the note, we don't pay the mortgage. Then, if we don't pay the note, then the mortgage kicks in as the security interest to allow the bank to foreclose the lien. So how does this all relate in the concept of marriage and divorce? Well, the way I describe it is you've got three documents. You've got the deed. The deed says who's on title to the property. Now be careful, because like I said at the beginning of the episode, for purposes of the Constitution, the deed may say one spouse or the other spouse or both spouses, but based on the Constitution, both spouses must sign the deed to convey the property to somebody else unless they are divorced. So the deed says who owns the property. If I'm on the deed, then I own it. If my wife is on the deed, she owns it. If we're on the deed together, then we both own it. But if only one of us is on the deed, then we own it, but the other one has homestead rights to it. So that's how the deed works. The next document we have is the note, the promissory note. Again, the promissory note is the document that says, I agree to borrow such and such amount of money to buy this house, and I'm going to pay it back at such and such interest rate over some period of time, 30 years in most cases, or 15 years. And I'm borrowing this money, and it says there's the late charge if I don't make the payments, and is there a prepayment penalty, and all of that information is contained within the promissory note. Then we've got the mortgage, and the mortgage says if I don't pay back the promissory note, then the bank can foreclose and take my house away. Now, the way that these three documents interact, and again, here in Florida, Florida is a lien theory state. So I own my house. I always own my house. The bank simply has a lien on it. It's not a situation where the bank's going to give me title when I pay off my house. The title is mine. And then when the house is paid off, the mortgage or note or both are satisfied. So anybody who is on title to the property on the deed must also sign the mortgage. So if I'm on title by myself, I'm on the deed by myself, but I am married, my wife has to sign the mortgage. And again, that goes back to the Florida constitutional issue. Anybody who is signs the note must sign the mortgage. So if I sign the promissory note, I have to sign the mortgage. If my wife and I both sign the promissory note, agreeing to borrow the money and agreeing to pay the bank back, then we both have to sign the mortgage. And so that's the way it works. So there could be a situation where I'm on title alone, I am married, I sign the note alone, but my wife and I have to sign the mortgage because I'm married. Or there could be a situation where my wife and I are on title, but I sign the note alone. Well, my wife and I have to sign the mortgage because we're married and because we both own the house. Or we both sign the deed, we both sign the note, we both sign the mortgage. So now, what happens in the case of a divorce? Well, a lot of times what I've said to clients, many times what I've said to clients is that the bank is not a party to the marriage, and so therefore cannot be a party to the divorce. And so a lot of times what will happen is husband and wife own the property, husband and wife sign the deed, husband and wife sign the mortgage. And so they then decide to get a divorce. And so the husband and wife agree that the wife is going to keep the house and the wife is going to be responsible for the note payments and the mortgage payments, and the husband is going to get a new house. Well, unfortunately, the bank is not a party to that agreement. So if the wife is making the note payments, the mortgage payments, the bank is going to sue both the husband and the wife. They have what's called joint and several liability, meaning both parties are 100% responsible. Now, what will happen in a situation like that, the husband would get sued in the foreclosure. The husband would then either go to the divorce court or go to the wife or even maybe go to the bank and say, hey, I don't have any responsibility for this house anymore. I got rid of it in my divorce. So please don't hold me liable. Don't hold me responsible. And I've been able to negotiate those types of things for clients of mine from time to time, where the bank will, if we agree to the foreclosure, the bank will agree to waive any deficiency. And so the husband's then not responsible to pay by direct agreement with the bank. But the divorce in that situation is merely a hardship. So that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand. And not only does that apply to mortgages, but it also applies to car payments, credit card payments, all this other stuff. Any debt that's a joint debt, IRS debt, the husband and wife are jointly responsible. If they get a divorce, even if the divorce court says one spouse is liable and the other spouse is not, the bank is not a part of the marriage. The bank is not a part of the divorce. The debt may be a cause of the divorce, but they're not a part of the divorce. And so in a situation like that, both parties would still be responsible. And so what would happen is the wife would say, well, husband, you said you were going to take the credit card debt, but I had to pay the credit card debt when you defaulted. So I'm going to go back into the divorce court and I'm going to see if I can make the divorce court force you to pay me back because I paid our credit card bills that you agreed to take on in the divorce. Now, whether that's a strategy that will work, again, I defer to some very good family law attorney friends of mine that can answer those types of questions for you. But that's typically the way that it works. And so you have to be really careful if you're going to get a divorce without an attorney. You really want to be careful who owes the debt, who's on the note, who's on the credit card agreement, who's on the car contract, who's responsible to repay the debt based on the contract with the bank. Then you have to take a look at, okay, well, what can we do between us to try to eliminate some of this stuff? Now, interestingly, there's a old case in Florida, probably not very well-known case in Florida, because what you'll notice is when you look at your note, when you look at your mortgage, on the note, anyone who signs the note is defined as a borrower. Anyone who signs the mortgage is defined as a borrower. And so for years and years and years, I would tell clients, well, listen, if the husband signed the note and just the husband and wife signed the mortgage, so the wife did not sign the note, in a situation like that, the wife would not be responsible to make payments to the bank because she didn't sign the note, and the note is what creates the liability. However, the mortgage defines the husband and wife as the borrower. And so there is a very old case in Florida that says if the wife signs the note and if the wife takes advantage of owning the house and living in the house and the husband making the mortgage payments and contributing to the household and all that kind of stuff, then the word borrower in the mortgage could mean that the wife is responsible to pay the bank based solely on her signing the mortgage. Now, would that theory hold water today? I don't think so, because now what the banks are doing is they will only talk to people who signed the note. And so if my wife signed the note and my wife and I both signed the mortgage, and I call up the bank and I say, hey, listen, I think my wife might be falling behind. I want to play catch up. The bank will say, well, you're not on the note. We can't talk to you without your wife's permission. There's a concept in the law called estoppel. And estoppel basically means if the bank is going to make me change my position on something that they do, then they're stuck with it. And so If the borrower defines me as a mortgage, as a borrower, if the mortgage defines me as a borrower, but my wife is the only one who signed the note, and I call up the bank and I say, hey, give me information on this loan. And the bank says, no, we're not giving you information on this loan. You didn't sign the note. You're not the borrower. Well, the fact that the mortgage defines me as the borrower, I think I have an affirmative defense there. I think I have the ability to say, well, bank, if you're not going to recognize me as the one who owes you money, then I don't owe you any money. There's also another case here in Florida where a husband and wife got divorced, and the husband modified the loan. Now, the husband and wife had signed the promissory note. The husband and wife had signed the mortgage. But because of some clerical error at the bank allowed the husband alone to modify the note and the mortgage. And so years and years later, the husband defaults and the bank sues the husband and the wife. At that point, the wife makes a defense and says, well, wait a minute. I didn't know anything about this modification. And so, bank, if you're going to let my husband modify the loan without including me, then I shouldn't be responsible to pay back this loan. And the court agreed with her. And the court said, bank, if you're going to change the terms of the loan, require that the husband sign it, you have effectively eliminated the wife as a borrower on this loan. Now, interestingly, I used this theory to help a client in a situation where it was a business debt, not a marital debt. And so the client was separating from his business partner, and the business partner had later gone out and modified a lot of the business loans, most of them to take this ex-partner off. But there was one loan that they were allowed to modify where just the remaining partner had signed the loan modification documents. And when the business defaulted, the bank went after both partners. And the one partner that had left the business came to me, and I made the argument to the bank. And I said, hey, wait a minute. You modified the loan with the partner that kept the business. You did not modify the loan. You didn't have the partner who left the business sign the modification. And so therefore, the partner that left the business should no longer be liable. And here's this case site that says that. And ultimately, we were able to get that partner to escape the liability. The partner who left the business, we were able to get him relieved of liability because the partner that stayed with the business had modified the loan without the other's consent, without the other's knowledge, and certainly without the other joining in on that modification. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in terms of divorce and banks and borrowing and money and debt. But let me know if you have any questions related to divorce and mortgages. Let me know if you have any questions about I signed the mortgage and note, or my husband signed the note alone, or we're both on title, or we're not on title. It can get kind of confusing. It can even get kind of confusing for divorce attorneys. Some of my best friends are divorce attorneys, and I love you all. But there are some divorce attorneys that know very, very little about dirt law. And so that's where I can come in and help all these divorce attorneys with different property settlements, different homestead issues, different homestead questions. So if you have any questions about divorce, please contact me. I'm always able to answer your questions, and I'll either shoot you an email, or if it's a great topic, maybe I'll record a podcast episode about it. I do want to remind everybody one more time, go ahead and pick up a copy of the Crushing Debt book, now available on Amazon. If you like the book, I would really, really appreciate your positive reviews. Also, I would love to request positive reviews of the law firm on social media, on Google, on all the different websites here. I would love to get some more positive reviews about the law firm itself. So if you've done some work with me, if you are a client of mine, and you appreciate the work that I've done for you, I would really love it if you could leave us a positive review. But that is it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, and I look forward to speaking to you all in next week's episode. So, Facebook Live, we are done. I'm done recording. Let me just save this thing here. So I want to save this as a podcast episode so that we can get it engineered. So what I'll do now, I'll record the bear audio, which I've done here, and then this will all go to my editor. He'll then add all the intro and outro music, and then it'll go up. I'll post it probably early December for you all to take a listen. I will also take this video and I'll get it up on YouTube, and I'll probably release this video on YouTube the same Thursday that the podcast is released, probably the first or second Thursday in December. And so that is it for this week's episode. I will try to record a couple more here, sort of peel back the curtain, let you see what's going on here in terms of recording the Crushing Debt podcast. I will sort of leave it open for a little bit. I know we've got a few people online here. Does anybody have any questions? Any legal questions that you want me to answer? Maybe a legal question that will become another podcast episode as soon as this one is done exporting. So I will wait for a minute or two. I see a whole bunch of people in here. Hi, Michael. It looks like you may be gone by now, but if you're still in the room, hello, how you doing? Tina, thank you. Congratulations on the Crushing Debt book release. Thank you, Tina. I appreciate it. All the other people here who are online, who are on the video, thank you. It looks like that's all we have in terms of content for this episode. Oh, Michael, you are still on. Cool. Well, I guess I don't really have any questions. So that's all for this week's episode. When I record another episode, I'll get the camera going. I'll turn it on, and I'll give you the behind the scenes of a recording of a Crushing Debt podcast episode. But that is all for this week. Wow, it doesn't sound like my voice is going to hold out anymore anyway. So that is all for this week. I know we're supposed to be evergreen in our podcast content, but as today is the Tuesday before the Thanksgiving, I will just simply say have a happy holiday and a happy Thanksgiving. Hello. Hi. How you doing? Good. How are you?